In the year 1872, New York gave its citizens a gift: 3 feet of free air. It was a legal loophole that allowed the middle class to literally push their homes out over the sidewalk to take advantage of that extra sunlight. It created the aureole, the prow of the ship that defines so many streets in Brooklyn. Today's developers are destroying the very core of New York's residential neighborhoods, replacing the Rowhouse with flat, featureless beehives and file cabinets. They seem to perceive sunlight as an unnecessary flourish. The aureole, or in popular parlance, the Italianate Rowhouse, is now on the long list of architectural endangered species in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn?
Brooklyn is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City.
Be polite.
Okay, you're right. If I were talking about, say, Monty, I would certainly specify that it's one of Rome's old neighborhoods.
That's right.
Okay, Brooklyn used to be a separate city. It was brought into the fold along with the other 4 back in 1898. As a result, Brooklyn City Hall became Borough Hall, and the mayor became borough president, a ceremonial post rather than an actual job. And like the rest of the world, the city has been governed by greedy swindlers, embezzlers, and homicidal maniacs ever since.
You're being rude again.
I apologize. They're all upstanding citizens, highly patriotic, and painstakingly sympathetic to their neighbor's lot.
Much better.
Thank you. While tourists and some of the folks who haven't lived here for generations admire Fifth Avenue limestone, these houses were once the high-water mark of the American middle class. They're everywhere. Their story goes back all the way to ancient Rome.
Brooklyn and ancient Rome? How so?
Well, in the 1st century BC, even as Rome was still a republic, if you were a Roman senator or simply an aristocrat, you owned 2 types of villas. There was the villa rustic, a working farmhouse with olive presses, granaries, and slaves. It was a food-producing factory. And there was also the villa urbana, urban but outside the city. These looked like ordinary farmhouses on the outside, but they had all the amenities of the city inside, like baths, libraries, mosaics, and terraces with picturesque views of the Mediterranean. The villa urbana was arguably the first time in history when architecture was used as an escape from urban life. It had become a custom among the wealthy and powerful to look down on the city, the bustle, the odor, the crime rate, and above all, the plebeians. I mean, you take your morning ablutions, have a little breakfast, sip a little diluted wine, put on a fresh tunic, get out in the street, and there they are, the plebeians. Merchants, tradesmen, horse breeders, farmers, tax collectors. They're loud, uncultured, completely uninterested in the works of Varro, or Plato for that matter. They can't read Greek. Some of them can't even read Latin. They have no idea what high culture is. They don't appreciate architecture. They're always shouting and laughing like a bunch of hyenas. They litter. They piss in the street. And they smell. Now, who wants that? Not someone as refined and gentle as a Roman patrician. And so, those Roman patricians, they moved to the suburbs. Undeveloped suburbs, mind you. There were no malls, no thoroughfares, no parking lots, no subdivisions, no Philistine authentic restaurants, just nature. Wealthy Romans were big on nature, as everyone should be. Following the fall of Rome and the Middle Ages, the Medici family in Florence, the great bankers, the original bankers, decided to revive the Roman dream. They hired architects like Alberti to design homes that looked like farmhouses from a distance, but functioned like palaces inside. And that's directly connected to these Italianate buildings in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And that's the official name for the style, Italianate. They started building those towards the end of the 19th century and continued well into the 20th to give a clerk in Brooklyn the feeling of being a Roman patrician. This was the Gilded Age, the American equivalent of a similar epoch across the pond known as La Belle Époque, the beautiful epoch. Oh, you know, the can-can, the Moulin Rouge, Lehár's music, dancing, amazing fashions, benevolent millionaires, altruistic courtesans, questionable hygiene, all that. The speculative boom commenced in the 1880s. The Industrial Revolution had raised middle-class incomes. All these clerks, lithographers, watchmakers, master carpenters, postmasters, precinct captains, music teachers, independent seamstresses, neighborhood pharmacists, hardware store owners, and barbers. They couldn't afford townhouses, and apartment buildings did not yet have the amenities they do today.
No indoor plumbing.
In many instances, yeah, that's correct. So, they couldn't just move outside the city either. Back then, the idea of commuting to work wasn't yet popular. You lived within walking distance of your workplace, or later on, you could get to work by subway in less than 30 minutes. So, developers saw an opportunity. By pushing the windows out 3 feet past the building's line, you could catch the sun from the east and west simultaneously. Most of those row houses were built on tiny lots. They gave the residents that villa feel, you know, the bay window, the high stoop, the cornice, while remaining part of the urban fabric. And this was made possible by the Industrial Revolution.
Don't you get tired of people blaming the Industrial Revolution for everything? Oh, come on. The Industrial Revolution worshipped harmony and beauty, architectural harmony and beauty. The Industrial Revolution gave us today's Paris and today's New York. The Industrial Revolution cared about residential buildings. Neoclassical and Beaux-Arts are both children of the Industrial Revolution. And yes, those row houses with bay windows, they are also children of the Industrial Revolution. They wouldn't be there without it.
You'll notice that the cornices and the decorative sculpture on these houses, they look like stone, but they often peel and rust and require a bit of maintenance now and then. That's because they're not stone. They're pressed galvanized iron or zinc. These were mass-produced in factories, shipped by cart and bolted onto the brick, which effectively and conclusively proves that beauty can be industrialized. Unlike the developers of 2026, their colleagues back in the year of our Lord 1900 could afford mass-produced elegance. It was viewed as good form. A row of these houses running down the entire block creates an eye-pleasing urban architectural wave. Today's developers, at war with those row houses as we speak, they do not offer potential residents villas. They build storage containers for humans. There are no apartments either, only units. They're replacing rhythmic human-scaled masonry with warehouses for people to sleep in. So, what's going on? What's with this war on the row house? Whose chicken soup did the tenants piss in? Whom is the presence of historic urban architecture hurting? Why now and not 50 years ago? There are many factors, one of which is the slow and steady disappearance of the middle class. There's the wealthy, and there's everybody else. I understand how it might appeal to the poor. I mean, misery loves company. Be broke. Be one of us. See if you like it. But not without a fight. While COVID seems to have expedited the process here and there are holdouts. Ideally, A developer needs to buy out the entire block, tear everything down, dig a single large hole for the foundation, and thrust in that unit container. Well, some folks, some of them living in the same houses for generations, neighborhood staples, native Brooklynites, they refuse to sell. And so periodically you'll encounter this kind of scene. One or two buildings on the corner standing in dignified solitude. The rest leveled. Sometimes the holdouts are in the middle of the block, like this. Why do developers hate the bay window and the oriel?
Indeed. Why?
The idea is that it costs money to support a hanging structure. A flat wall is cheap. A protruding oriel is an unnecessary structural flourish. That's their excuse, yes.
A bit on the flimsy side.
Well, 2 points. One, it is precisely the structural flourishes that make neighborhoods desirable in the first place. Two, the idea that it costs more to build beautiful buildings is decades out of date. Not with today's materials, not with today's technology. It's just laziness. Lazy designers, lazy engineers, officials who see no evil yet will sell their own mother for a penny, and of course the developers. Today's developers are exactly like Madame de Pompadour, the King Louis XV's mistress. After us the deluge. Swoop in, do some damage, make a quick buck, and walk away. And who cares what happens as the result of your little pranks? The bay window is the prow of the ship. It creates a certain inimitable street rhythm. It makes the street outside look cozy. Inside, the bay window creates what's referred to as the parlor alcove. It's the best place to have your morning coffee. Now, here's an interesting historic parallel. In the 18th century, the zoning laws in Paris stipulated that only full-fledged floors, actual floors, were to be taxed. The attic went tax-free. This resulted in developers building facades that sloped away from the street. Anything that wasn't vertical was an attic now, no matter how many floors it contained. This resulted in that signature Parisian look. Because the facade slopes backward, more sunlight reaches the street. Now, in 1872, a specific code revision in New York made developers realize they could project 3 feet over the property line for free. It was rentable square footage borrowed from the sky. Sometimes a silly nuance in the code can produce miraculous results. Now, the war on the Rowhouse continues merrily, but there's spark slope. Those are not going down, thankfully. Why not? Because they are overpriced, because they've been transformed into luxury boutique houses. Park Slope is no longer middle class. It's the managerial elite and some IT people. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Good architecture is good for you. It lifts your spirits. Bad architecture chips away at your good mood all day long. It's depressing. It's hostile to humans. We can petition and we can vote. To my way of thinking, a law or two should be passed pertaining to all this. I mean, if you have this overpowering desire to knock something down and replace it with something else, you better make sure that this something else is equal to or an improvement on what stands there now in these 3 areas: strength, function, and beauty, as per Vitruvius. Thank you for watching. I'm Ricky Vernier, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, and I'll see you soon.